The holes. That's all most people know about this cheese. You see those holes and instantly think. Swiss cheese, simple. But here's what almost nobody talks about. In 2023, a European court officially ruled that the word Emmentaler is a generic term. Switzerland, the country that created this cheese centuries ago, went to court and lost. The name now belongs to everyone. And that one legal decision created a strange reality. 3 different protected cheeses, each with its own rules, its own region, and its own identity, now share supermarket shelves with mass-produced versions carrying the exact same name. Today we're going to separate them and show you what you're actually buying. Emmentaler takes its name from the Em Valley, or Emmental, in the Swiss canton of Bern. The name literally means from the Em Valley. Cheese making in this region dates back to at least the 13th century, and by the 16th century, large wheels were already being exported throughout Europe. By the 19th century, enormous wheels weighing up to 100 kilograms were traveling by horse cart to markets across France, Germany, and beyond. But this is where things become complicated. When the European Union introduced its protected food designation system in 1992, Emmentaler was classified as a generic term. It joined names like cheddar, Gouda, Edam, Brie, and Camembert. In other words, the EU decided that the name described a style of cheese rather than a specific place of origin. Switzerland has spent decades trying to reverse that decision. As recently as 2025, the European Commission rejected another Swiss attempt to internationally protect the name, arguing that Emmentaler has been produced across multiple European countries for generations and is now recognized globally as a cheese type rather than a geographical origin. To understand the modern Emmentaler landscape, we need to start with the original, Swiss Emmentaler AOP. Swiss Emmentaler AOP is the authentic version from the Emme Valley. Within Switzerland, it has been protected since 2002, but internationally it is often marketed as Emmentaler Switzerland, because the name Emmentaler alone cannot be protected abroad. The production rules are exceptionally strict. The milk must be fresh raw cow's milk. No pasteurization. No thermization. The cows must come from local farms, and the dairy cannot be more than 20 kilometers away. Industrial production is not permitted. Even the wheel size is regulated, with most wheels weighing around 90 kilograms and requiring roughly 1,100 liters of milk. The aging process happens in 3 stages. First, the wheel spends time in a cool, humid cellar where the rind begins to develop. Then, it moves into a warm room where bacteria consume lactic acid and release carbon dioxide, creating the famous holes. Finally, the cheese returns to a cooler cellar for long maturation. The result is one of the world's most recognizable cheeses. The holes themselves are carefully regulated. They should be round to slightly oval, glossy, and roughly the size of cherries or walnuts. Those shiny surfaces tell cheesemakers that the fermentation process happened correctly. Poorly formed holes often reveal shortcuts in production. Flavor-wise, Swiss Emmentaler AOP is far more complex than most people expect. Young versions are sweet and buttery with gentle hazelnut notes. As the cheese ages, fruit flavors emerge, sometimes resembling pineapple or dried apricot. Older wheels become denser and more intense, developing earthy complexity and subtle crystalline texture while maintaining a surprisingly sweet finish due to their very low salt content. Cave-aged versions, matured in natural sandstone caves for extended periods, develop even deeper character and darker rinds. Now let's move to Germany, where one of Europe's most underrated cheeses is quietly being produced. Many people assume German Emmentaler is simply an imitation of the Swiss original. That's not true. Allgäuer Emmentaler PDO is a fully protected European cheese with legal status equal to Parmigiano Reggiano, Comté, or Swiss Emmentaler AOP. Its story begins in 1821, when Swiss cheesemaker Josef Orel Stadler introduced Emmentaler production methods to Bavaria's Allgäu region. Over time, the area developed its own cheese tradition and eventually secured PDO protection. Allgäuer Emmentaler must be made from raw milk, sourced within the designated production zone. Wheel sizes are comparable to the Swiss version, and the aging process also includes a warm room stage specifically designed for eye formation. The result is a cheese that shares the same ancestry as Swiss Emmentaler, but expresses a different terroir. The flavor is typically more assertive than the Swiss version. The unique flora of the Allgäu region produces milk with distinctive herbal and spicy notes. The cheese remains nutty and sweet, but often finishes with a slightly stronger alpine character. This isn't a copy of Swiss Emmentaler. It's a legitimate regional interpretation that deserves recognition in its own right. France takes yet another approach. Instead of one protected Emmentaler, it produces two. The first is Emmental de Savoie PGI, made in the French Alps within Savoie and Haute-Savoie. Despite carrying a PGI designation rather than PDO status, the production rules are surprisingly strict. The milk must be raw and sourced from specific local cattle breeds. Every stage of production takes place within the designated region. Each wheel requires up to 1,000 liters of milk and must mature for at least 75 days. The second French version is Emmental Français Est-Central PGI. This cheese comes from a larger production zone and allows pasteurized milk, making it more accessible and widely available. It sits somewhere between the artisanal Savoy version and large-scale industrial production. Emmental de Savoie has a distinct personality. Compared to Swiss Emmentaler, it often tastes fresher and more floral, with notes of mountain herbs and a slightly tangy finish. The holes are usually smaller and less perfectly round due to differences in fermentation and production techniques. It remains a serious terroir-driven cheese with a strong regional identity. Then, we arrive at the cheese most people actually buy. The vast majority of Emmentaler sold in supermarkets carries no protected designation whatsoever. It follows basic technical standards for moisture, bacterial cultures, and eye formation, but there is no requirement for raw milk, no geographical restriction, and no obligation to follow traditional methods. It can be produced almost anywhere in Europe and sold simply as Emmentaler. This is completely legal. It is not fraud, but it is a fundamentally different product from the protected cheeses we've been discussing. Industrial Emmentaler is designed for consistency. The flavor is mild, clean, and approachable. The holes are often smaller and more uniform. Aging periods are shorter, sometimes only a few weeks. It melts well, performs reliably in cooking, and satisfies everyday consumers. But it lacks the complexity, depth, and regional character that define the protected versions. So how do you know what you're buying? If you're looking for Swiss Emmentaler AOP, search for the AOP logo and the Emmentaler Switzerland branding. Raw milk declarations are another good sign. For Allgäuer Emmentaler PDO, look for the official European PDO logo and the full name on the label. Emmental de Savoie PGI will usually have Savoy stamped directly onto the rind and display the PGI logo. Emmental Français Est-Central PGI will also carry the PGI mark. If none of those designations appear on the packaging, you're almost certainly looking at generic Emmentaler. There is one final trick. Look at the holes. Properly made Emmentaler from any protected designation should have round, glossy eyes that appear almost moist. Their appearance reflects healthy fermentation and careful maturation. Dry, dull, irregular holes often signal accelerated production and shorter aging times. And don't ignore the rind. As any affineur will tell you, the rind reveals almost everything. A living, natural rind carries aromas of caves, fermentation, and maturation. A sterile rind tells a very different story. The world of Emmentaler is far more complicated than most people realize. Swiss Emmentaler AOP, Allgäuer Emmentaler PDO, and Emmental de Savoie PGI are all authentic protected cheeses with genuine regional identities and centuries of tradition behind them. They exist alongside a generic industrial product that dominates supermarket shelves. Knowing the difference doesn't just make you a better cheese buyer, it helps preserve some of Europe's most remarkable cheese-making traditions. So now I want to hear from you. Did you know that Germany and France produce protected versions of Emmentaler? Have you ever specifically sought out Allgäuer Emmentaler PDO or Emmental de Savoie PGI? And which version have you actually tasted? This is Cheese Heaven TV, where cheese lovers unite. If you learned something new today, subscribe for more deep dives into the world's greatest cheeses. Until next time, eat well, age gracefully, and never settle for mediocre cheese.